On the morning of the 6th of August, 2005, the bustling port city of Fortaleza in northeastern Brazil woke up to what seemed like a normal weekend. People went about their day, unaware that a state bank was minutes away from making history. No alarms, no gunshots, no witnesses. Yet more than 160 million Brazilian reals in cash, about $70 million back then, roughly 3.5 tons, vanished from the central bank's vault without a sound. When investigators finally looked underground, they discovered one of the most ingenious crimes ever pulled off. A narrow tunnel running for tens of meters from a fake turf shop straight to the bank's vault, something you'd expect to see in a movie, not the nightly news. This was one of the biggest heists in Brazil's history, and arguably one of the largest ever. We all watched La Casa de Papel, thinking it was fiction. But I promise you, this real-life heist is every bit as clever, and it's one of the most extraordinary ever documented. This is the almost silent, absolutely shocking story of how millions disappeared beneath everyone's feet. Everything started months before the break-in. The brains of the operation was a man known by the alias Alemão, while the money behind it came from Fernandinho, real name Fernando Ribeiro, the financier and the darker face of the plot. The crew was around 34 people deep, each with a job. Construction workers, professional tunnelers, ex-cons, folks with engineering know-how, and most crucially, bank security guards willing to leak inside info. That inside help from the guards would later allow the heist to unfold in a far more professional way. Alemão went looking for a strategic house close to the bank. The objective was simple: start from a spot no one would suspect and tunnel straight into the central bank's underground vault, the symbol of the country's financial security. The bank was a fortress, known for heavy security and massive reserves, which, of course, made it irresistible to determined thieves. After weeks of scouting, the crew rented a modest home on a quiet street, close enough to the target, but out of sight. There was just one obvious problem. Digging a tunnel produces a mountain of dirt, and carting that away raises eyebrows. So they built a cover story. They registered a fake landscaping business because turf means soil, and soil means hauling dirt. If trucks left with bags of material, nobody would think twice. They even painted the house green and slapped a sign on it: Grama Sintética, synthetic grass. From the outside, it looked like a legit lawn and landscaping shop. One crew member, using the alias Paulo Sergio, fronted the company. His fake ID listed a birth date of the 8th of May 1968, the exact day the heist would go down years later. That creepy little detail shows how much they enjoyed flexing their smarts. Sergio charmed the neighbors, ran a branded van, even issued fake invoices so it looked like real business was happening. But the shop was far more than a simple disguise. It gave them weeks to watch the area, study the underground layout, and finalize the exact line for the tunnel. No one had the slightest clue that behind this ordinary storefront, Brazil's largest criminal engineering project was being built piece by piece. By May, shovels hit soil. The crew dropped about 4 meters below the house and started tunneling toward the vault. A 7-man team worked in rotating shifts, non-stop. Up front, one man dug and pushed soil aside. Behind him, another bagged it. Someone tied the bag, hooked it to a rope, and another hauled it to the exit. Outside, a second team stacked the bags, and the cycle never stopped. Their toughest logistical problem was disposing of all that dirt without drawing attention. Night after night, truckloads were dumped well outside the city under the cover of a fake landscaping job. To avoid suspicion, they kept the vans looking clean and covered the soil with tarps. When constant hauling started to feel suspicious, they began stockpiling dirt inside the house. Once a room filled up, they literally bricked it off. When every room was full, they dumped soil into the yard until the ground level rose nearly a meter. This went on for months, without any neighbor or any official catching on. Tunneling is loud. How did no one notice for so long? Simple, they blended in. Everyone thought they were just hard-working landscapers. Below ground, they were a machine. They encountered a sewer line at one point, adjusted the angle, and kept going. By the end, the tunnel was about 80 meters long and only 70 centimeters wide, just enough for a person to crawl or crouch through. Narrow, but incredibly effective. In a tunnel that long, oxygen drops fast, and CO2 builds up to dangerous levels. They planned for that. The team installed a ventilation system, fans at the entrance pumping fresh air through piping along the tunnel. To prevent cave-ins, they reinforced the walls with roughly 900 wooden planks. They had hoses for drinking water and battery-powered lamps for light, no reliance on the grid that might tip someone off. To avoid leaving electronic trails, they kept phones out and used a wired intercom line for constant communication. GPS units and local maps helped them steer clear of underground utilities. Honestly, this wasn't a crime tunnel. It was more like a micro-subway line. This was engineering, not improvisation. As the big day approached, nerves were high. 3 months in, on Friday night, the 5th of August, 2005, the tunnel finally reached the exact spot beneath the central bank's vault, millimeter perfect, after weeks of measurements. How did they know where to break through? Former bank security guards D.O.C. Marquillos and Edelson Vieira fed them the sensitive detail: vault locations, patrol timings, how the alarms work. That intel, plus team members with real engineering chops, let them aim scientifically, not guess. A tiny error would have ruined everything. They didn't miss. They chose the weekend on purpose: fewer people around, less attention, more time to work. With the bank closed, guards were less alert, and the area was quieter. Only one obstacle was left: the vault wall itself, about a meter of steel-reinforced concrete. They attacked it with industrial-grade tools: custom drills, hydraulic jacks, metal cutters, welding gear. This part was risky because of the noise and vibrations, but the closed bank meant no one noticed. After roughly 3 hours, they punched through. Inside, the forklift used for moving cash had, conveniently, been left in front of a camera during the day, so when they crawled in, they weren't in the field of view. For extra safety, they stacked pallets in front of the opening in case a lens did catch the area. And, get this, the 5 cameras in the vault weren't even recording. They only streamed live and didn't have zoom. Identifying faces was basically impossible. A 4-man team hugged the walls to avoid motion sensors and reached the stacks of cash. Freshly printed notes had tracked serials and were risky, so they ignored them. The target was older, 50 real notes bills near retirement or otherwise not easily traced, especially since the bank hadn't sorted them by serial number. Once those hit circulation, following them would be close to impossible. The operation to move the money kicked off Friday night around 10 p.m. and wrapped up by about 6 a.m. Saturday. The total, 164 million Brazilian reals, roughly 70 million US dollars then, about 3.5 tons of paper. Stack that money and you'd get a tower around 330 meters high. At the time, it was the biggest cash robbery Brazil and arguably the world had ever seen. And of course, the bank had alarms, but those systems focus on doors, windows, exterior walls, and interior motion. The thieves had studied the security layout for months and found the blind spot: an attack from meters underground. No alarms trip. They exploited that gap flawlessly. After roughly 11 hours of intense work, it was time to disappear. To move a load that heavy through a cramped tunnel, they'd built a small rail line. The evacuation ran with military discipline: one direction, one lane, for hours. By the end of 3 months digging and one very long night, everyone knew their cut. Leaders and financiers expected between 10 and 20 million reals apiece. Diggers and laborers around 2 million each. They loaded the cash into pre-arranged vehicles and the company van and then evaporated into the night. When the dust settled, there were 2 holes and a country in shock. On Monday morning, bank staff returned from the weekend. At first glance, everything looked fine. Doors intact, cameras, alarms silent. Until someone went down to the vault. Doors locked. Vault empty. Loose bills and bundles littered the dirty floor. Leaving that behind screamed one thing: they bailed fast. The quicker they got out, the lower their risk, and honestly, they'd already scored more than enough. The hole in the vault floor stunned employees. Police rushed in. This clearly wasn't a run-of-the-mill break-in. Officer Enéas Soprera crawled into the tunnel, inching forward for nearly an hour before climbing up and out at the starting point, then radioed the location to the others. When police reached the house, it looked like a mine. Digging tools, gravel, canned food, clothes, and hundreds of sandbags stacked to the ceiling. A white powder had been scattered everywhere to wipe out fingerprints. The crew was so professional that once the money moved, they vanished in sync. Some fled to other cities, some left the country, others started laundering cash, hotels, cars, a luxury lifestyle, fake IDs typical, some disappeared completely. Others drew way too much attention. Because here's the thing, becoming an overnight millionaire in only 50 real notes is complicated. Small purchases in cash are easy, big ones, not so much. The day after the heist, several members bought 10 cars at a dealership, paying roughly 1 million Brazilian reals in 50 real notes. They then hid about 6 million reals inside the car bodies and shipped them by truck to Sao Paulo. That kind of all-cash instant purchase lit the dealership's radar, and staff tipped off police. Buying that many vehicles at once was weird enough. Doing it in small bills without a plan B for laundering screamed amateur hour. The crew had run a brilliant operation, then got sloppy. Within days, a few suspects were in cuffs, but the top dogs? Still ghosts. Once the story hit the press, Brazil reeled. It wasn't just the money, it was the engineering talent, the discipline, the perfect camouflage. The case drew global attention. The manhunt quickly became the biggest in the country's history, so big that the FBI joined in, worried the money could fuel international crime. Tracking the cash was a nightmare, especially those untraceable dirt-stained 50 real bills dragged through the tunnel. Even so, by November 2005, authorities had arrested 13 people directly tied to the heist. The cars, rental papers for Seirio's house, and a prepaid phone card found during a search gave investigators their first big breaks. Using the SIM serial number, they identified the device and uncovered hundreds of hours of calls mapping the network, showing how the crew scattered, laundered the cash into assets, and funded new crimes. What started as a perfect crime quickly spiraled into blackmail, kidnappings, and murders. People started calling the money cursed. One of the ringleaders, Fernandinho, was kidnapped by his own associates not long after the heist. His family paid a massive ransom, but he was killed anyway. His body turned up off a highway near Fortaleza. It exposed the paranoia inside the crew, greed, betrayal, and brutality in the name of cash. The investigation kept rolling with hundreds of agents. Many arrests came when suspects tried to launder money through luxury cars, real estate, and drug and arms trafficking. Alemão himself was caught laundering funds in 2008, after years on the run. He was convicted of charges including criminal conspiracy, forged documents, and money laundering, sentenced to 49 years and 2 months. Even then, he kept scheming. In 2017, he was shot while trying to escape from Fortaleza prison and spent 3 days in the hospital. Over the years, 129 people were arrested in connection with the heist. Combined sentences handed down from the first trials onward add up to more than 2,452 years. And yet despite that massive effort, only about 11% of the money was ever recovered, roughly 18 million. The central bank had to reissue those banknotes. That recovery rate proves how effective the crew's strategy was, targeting older, unsorted bills that couldn't be tracked by serial. It also shows the damage untraceable funds can do when they flood the underground economy, fueling money laundering, warping local markets, and corrupting institutions through bribery. Some seized cash turned up as luxury cars, properties, and even small businesses bought with stolen money. Investigators also found investments in other illegal trades, like drugs and arms. In other words, millions melted into Brazil's criminal underworld. Disturbingly, evidence also surfaced that a few police officers colluded with the thieves, taking bribes for protection, another sign of how deeply crime can penetrate public institutions. After this heist, banks worldwide were forced to rethink security, especially against underground threats. It wasn't enough to guard doors and windows. New countermeasures rolled out: better sensors, tunnel detection systems, thermal cameras, and continuous monitoring below ground. The robbery earned a spot in the Guinness World Records as the largest of its kind at the time, cementing its place in criminal history and global headlines. And in the years that followed, dozens of similar tunnels targeting vaults were discovered in Brazil and even Paraguay. The central bank heist wasn't just Brazil's, it was one of the world's most complex and carefully engineered crimes. No violence, zero alarms, zero eyewitnesses. It stands out not only for the jaw-dropping amounts stolen, but for the tunnel's engineering, the elegance of the disguise, and the team's operational discipline. It's one of the boldest, most sophisticated bank robberies ever recorded. Where did the 164 million go? Even today, the fate of those 3.5 tons of cash is a mystery for many Brazilians. Maybe one day someone will stumble on traces in the depths of the rainforest or in a sleepy beach town. Maybe it vanished forever with the people who took it.